Hello and welcome to the Katra Film Series Alumni Spotlight. I'm Jason Godbey, and my guest today, he's an award-winning filmmaker and the director currently running series The Letter for the King for Netflix, Mr. Felix Thompson. Welcome, Felix.
Hey, how's it going?
So how did you kind of come to filmmaking? What is your origin story, so to speak?
The funny thing is, I think I actually, I really wanted to be a professional soccer player, as I think most kids my age did. But when that dream didn't pan out, you kind of had to find something else. No, I grew up in a lot of different parts of the world. I was born in Australia. I kind of was, when I was about 9, I moved to New York. I grew up in New York, between New York and France. My family was kind of a family of storytellers. My dad was a very political playwright. My mom was an actress, and so that was always kind of the thing that had been discussed around the family table. I think they would have loved for me not to go into this industry for sure, which I think anyone whose parents have been in the arts would say, please, anything else. But, I fell in love with it. I remember specifically in high school, the first time I had this English teacher who had us write a play. And it was the first time I think I got to see something get put on its feet and have actors kind of take over the story. Kind of you as the storyteller sort of starts to disappear and the story itself takes on a life of its own. And that was a really beautiful thing for me. And when I sort of got hooked, I then went to film school and did a bunch of shorts that did the festival circuit, Tribeca, South by, London, Katra, all this kind of stuff. And then was very fortunate to get to make my first feature film, which went to Tribeca and won the Audience Award. And that was kind of the launching pad for being able to actually make a career out of it.
You submitted a short. You were in Katra. In fact, I think it was the first year of Katra's existence. You had a film called The Third One This Week. So talk a little bit about that experience and kind of tell me, what you would say to filmmakers who are thinking of submitting a short to Katra.
The thing that I would say first is, so The Third One This Week was a film that I made after film school. And I think that there is, whether you're in film school or looking to make films, it's really important to give yourself and set yourself very tangible goals. And after I graduated, I had made a short film that, did the festival circuit. And there was this big question of like, what do you do next? And the most important thing I did, I think, for myself was to say, okay, I'm making myself a goal, which is every year, I'm setting myself a goal of making one short film and writing one feature film. And just having that in mind meant that, the next year I got to make The Third One This Week. But also meant that I was always writing features. And I think the thing that's important about that for filmmakers is like, you don't want to be coasting off that one short you made 5 years ago. You always want to be current. You want to be honing your craft. You're gonna learn things, and you're gonna discover things. I mean, there are things that I learned on the shorts that I made post my kind of first one that taught me things that were invaluable going forward into the feature. So I would say that's like the first thing I would say is, advice for filmmakers submitting to festivals is keep making shorts, even if your first one is successful. And if your second one is successful, keep making shorts. And if your third one is successful, keep making shorts, because they're all going to teach you something. But as far as
right there, that's a great point. Just because I think a lot of people, they do that, say, well, I made a short, and then there is it. It's like ions. They have a half-life, and they only kind of last so long. And I think a lot of people don't realize in this business, you're only as good as the last thing you did.
And I think that's a good point. And there is no magic one film that one short film that's going to change the trajectory of your career. I think that ideally you should have a body of work that when someone then reads the feature that you're ready to make, they can look at not just one short, but a handful of shorts and say, oh, I can see what this filmmaker is going to do with this material, because I can see what their voice is. I can see how they approach a story, how they work with actors, what their point of view is. And I think that's incredibly important.
After you did Katra, obviously you went on to make King Jack, which was your first feature, I believe. So kind of just for people who aren't familiar, give me like the log line or the Hollywood description of it.
God, I don't think I've done the log line of that film in a bit now. It's ultimately the story of this 15-year-old kid who is the last person in the world that you would ever trust with any responsibility ever. And it is about this one weekend where he has to look after his little cousin for 2 days, and it quickly becomes the best and worst weekend of their lives.
Not bad, not bad. You got some. You've practiced, I can tell. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the process. So it's a feature film. And did you go through? So you won an award at Tribeca, which is prestigious. So did you go through like their institute? Did you develop it with them in their lab? Like how did it kind of come about, and how did you wind up landing it, through the process through distribution?
To kind of backtrack, like, a few breaths, doing all the shorts that we did on the festival circuit, and what the kind of festival circuit brought us was, places like Katra, Tribeca, South by, all these places that we were going, was not, I don't think any of those places, you end up in a lot of these festivals and people have this feeling that like, oh, you have to meet that one big producer who's in the room is going to change your career. And actually, I think the most important thing is not to come out of a festival with 100 business cards, but to come out of it with 4 people who you genuinely consider friends. And you're genuinely going to keep up with. Because we did our first shorts and kind of started meeting people that we liked and that we got along with. And that, 4 years later, when we were making King Jack, some of those people who, were either working at the festival at the time or were, short filmmakers or producers who were, kind of on the same level we were, had ended up in a lot of different places, and they were able to help us come together and make that feature, happen. So I think that's like a really big thing, and the big benefit of festivals is like just going there and finding a tribe and finding some people you get along with that you're going to want to keep in touch with. Coming out of film school, you have a community. And that was, a lot of the people, that was, the kind of central core creative team of the feature. And we were very fortunate to enter the Sundance labs, which were a really amazing experience. I think, I cannot recommend highly enough. If you have a script, submit to the Sundance labs. Every year you should have a script to submit to the Sundance labs. I mean, they are incredibly difficult to get into, but if you do get into them, they offer you such a vast array of resources, and they really kind of shepherd your project and take it under their wing in a way that there are just so many films out there. To be one of the 6, one of the 10, one of the 12 that are in the writer's lab, director's lab, producing lab really makes a huge difference. And they even introduced us to the financiers that we ended up, or at least to a good chunk of the financiers that we ended up going with to help make the film become a reality.
I keep hearing stuff, I was talking to somebody recently and they're like, yeah, festivals don't really do anything for you. They're a waste of time. They're a waste of money. Distribution, you can never make money on your first on your feature. Like it's such a hard road, and it just winds up being a $50,000 resume piece. But that doesn't seem to be your experience.
I mean, you know what? It wasn't, but I will say that I don't think that opinion is not justified. It is you are betting on yourself, and you're betting big, and it's not always a likely gamble to pay off. I mean, there were some incredible films that we were, when we were at Tribeca, there were some incredible films that we were with some incredible filmmakers that I really loved. And I saw those films and I was like, that is a fantastic film. That then, nothing happened with it. And it was crazy to think that like, it is so hard to get into one of the top tier film festivals with your first feature. But then it's like, you're there with 80, 60, 50 other features. And if you're not in the then of that group that got in, the able to win that audience award or win that best director award, like it can be a real struggle to find distribution and kind of get noticed. Even at a festival like Sundance, there are a lot of films that get lost. So it is a really hard road to toe. And I would say that you have to go into it knowing that, like you have to just say, look, I believe in this. I think this is a story worth telling. I think this is a powerful piece. This means something to me. I think this will mean something to others. And, you're putting it out there and you don't have control over the thing once you let it go.
Yeah, I feel like that's, it's a struggle for a lot of people, and I've gone through this by myself as a filmmaker. I've made several shorts. I haven't really gone the festival route with them just because it's expensive, it's arduous, like it's, you know, it takes a lot of time. And, you know, it's like you're spending money on something that has virtually no return investment, and you're not even guaranteed that you're going to get in, you know, so you can spend a lot of money on, you know, submitting to all these festivals. So yeah, you're right. You do have to really believe in the film, but I do feel like there's sort of, maybe there's levels to things, and, you know, you should maybe kind of look at your film, or try, maybe have somebody else look at your film objectively and kind of see, yeah, you know, is this a Sundance movie? Well, maybe not. You know, maybe it's more like you can get into a local festival or something. You know, I think the hard part for people like me in New York City is like your local festivals are incredibly competitive. You know, you're probably better off to, you know, submitting to the Sundance of Wyoming, you know, or Kansas than, you know, trying to get something at Big Apple Film Festival or New York Film Festival.
Or, you know, to be honest, taking that money, if you're able, you know, if you're able to look at the film honestly and say, you know, this isn't the best representation of who I am and the work that I can do, instead of putting all that money into festivals and promotional material and all that stuff, saying, you know what, because all that can easily add up to $1,000, $1,500, who knows, saying, you know what, let me take that money and put that into making another film, because you know, you know, there are so many people making shorts. You know, Sundance is getting like 10,000 a year. You really need to be putting out something that is that just kind of is undeniably good, that you just put in front of anybody, and there's no like, you know, the sound's not finished, or like it was raining that day, or whatever it is just undeniably good. And I think until you find that thing, it's okay to have put all this work into a film and look at it and say, I could do better. And I think that's kind of the benefit of making multiple shorts and of always pushing forward, is that it's the idea that you would hit a hole in one on your first outing is insane. You know, that's completely insane. You should allow yourself to fail, and make, you know, put less pressure on the first shorts, like make them exercises, you know, explore a location, explore a character, 2 people in a room. How do you make this as contained and simple as possible? I mean, even the third one this week, which was at Katra, which was at South by, which is a 3-minute short of with essentially 3 actors. It's 3 minutes. It all takes place in a hospital bathroom. It cost nothing to make, but it had come on the back of a bunch of exercises where I'd learned a lot of things about storytelling. And it goes to show you don't need to spend a ton of money on a short. You don't need a ton of resources. If the storytelling is good, if the acting is good, then it will stand out. So just keep working until you find that thing. Be less precious with the ideas.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest sort of cardinal sin for young filmmakers, is they're like, I'm going to spend 20 grand on this short. I'm going to spend, and you can see the, you know, the work that they put into it, but, you know, somebody should explain to people, and you did it very gently, but it's like, okay, if it's your first one, it's probably not going to be that great. You know, if you're like, you know, if you're Orson Welles, that's one thing, but, you know, usually your first one out of the gate is not going to Sundance, is not going to Tribeca, but, you know, you can put it online, you can get some feedback, and then, you know, make the next one and spend like $5 on it instead of, you know, $500,000. Like, because I've seen some of these shorts and you're like, oh my God, how much money did they spend on this thing? And I feel like there's no reason to do that unless it's a bigger thing, you know, unless it's your proof of concept or something.
Well, there's also like, you know, I mean, the number of times I've seen shorts coming out of Sundance that were, I mean, I remember this one short that came out, I don't remember what year this was now. It was called Funnel. And it was, I think it might have been shot on an iPhone. And it was one actor. The whole conceit of it was this guy on the phone to a friend. He'd bought this funnel that he needed to repair his car. And it's just this long walk back to his car. It takes forever. He goes through all these different places. And the writing is excellent. The performances are fantastic. But it clearly cost nothing to make. But it was just undeniably good. And, you know, you only get there by working a bunch of ideas. So it's like, you don't need to spend all this money on a ton of expensive material and upping these production values, because what people are looking for on the festival circuit is they're looking for new and exciting voices. And a new and exciting voice can tell a story with an iPhone and one light. So you really want to be working on the storytelling aspect. all of the, you know, I think the pitfall that a lot of people fall into is you fall in love with your favorite filmmakers and the people that you look up to. You know, you want to replicate that Tarantino oneer, or, you know, you want to get a Steadicam, you want to be able to do this thing, but it's like, that's not, you know, if someone like Tarantino starting out had only, you know, the smallest resources at his disposal, though the writing and the acting alone would carry those stories. It's not that, you know, the way in which he uses the camera is this like beautiful added bonus. The material that he has at his disposal is this beautiful added bonus, but like you know, I think sometimes you can look at a lot of French cinema, like, you know, or Belgian cinema, like the Dardenne brothers, and realize that the power of a story is in the power of the storytelling. It's not in the material you're using and the money you're spending.
Yeah, a friend of mine used to say, it's not the wand, it's the wizard. You know, like that's where the magic lies. And yeah, don't make Reservoir Dogs 2. You know, don't try to because you can't, and you're not, and you're just going to frustrate yourself. And I think maybe the hardest thing to do and hopefully you can do it if you're making shorts, is find out who you are. You know, find out what techniques you like, find out what shots you want to do, and try to craft your film that way. Because, you know, we don't need another Tarantino. We have one. You know, he's made a bunch of great films. We don't need another Spike Lee. Those guys already exist. I mean, definitely steal from them. You know, like steal. I'm sure there's people I don't know if you'll admit it, but there's probably people you stole from. You know,
I think you always start your artistic career kind of stealing from people you admire until you find your own voice. And I think that's what the early shorts really are. Until you start to figure out like, oh, okay, like this is how I tell a story. This is what I naturally gravitate towards. This is what I care about.
So moving on now, so you had directed King Jack, that got you some notoriety. And then it seems that your career has followed the path of many indie filmmakers. Make a good feature film, get notoriety, direct television. Like that seems to be a thing that happens to a lot of people, which now like TV is like so good. Like, especially if you want to make entertainment for adults, you know, over the age of like 13, that seems to be like the thing. So you've got this Netflix series that you're currently directing, and it's called The Letter for the King. Can you kind of tell us, first of all, again, give us like the log line for the show in case people haven't seen it, and then you know, kind of how did you come to it?
I mean, the log line for that show, it's really fun to pitch a log line for a show you didn't write. I think that the log line's in the title. It's a kind of medieval kind of Game of Thrones for younger audience. It's about a kid in a war-torn kingdom intercepts this letter that he has to take to the king all the way across the kingdom, and the future of the kind of world depends on it. So very kind of someone described it as 1917 in medieval times.
How did you wind up getting the gig?
I mean, the funny thing is, I would actually argue that, you know, you say it seems like the path to like do a feature, get some notoriety and jump into TV. But again, I would say, you know, that is not the norm. I think that we have this obsession with studying success, and we very rarely study failure. And I think there are many more examples of people who had a great first film and then did nothing afterwards. And so I think that, you know, I don't want to paint this as, you know, kind of in too rosy of a picture. That being said, you know, I think that there is a certain amount of, you know, you have to be talented, you have to be good, but there is a certain amount of luck involved in any career. And I think denying that is hubris. But this project in particular, I feel incredibly lucky to have gotten, because I always thought, you know, if you see King Jack, it is a very intimate, kind of gritty story, very personal story about, you know, a bunch of kids in upstate New York. And the idea that you would then say that director should work with horses and a bunch of, you know, and magic and a medieval world is, I don't see the link. But fortunately, these producers saw the film and they really liked it. And I always thought, you know, my first TV thing would maybe be doing, you know, an episode of season 4 of, you know, a show like How to Make It in America that's like very kind of grounded and simple and real. So when this came along, I was really surprised and really excited. And I mean, the biggest thing I can say is I pitched the hell out of it. I, did a huge pitch book. I knew that one of the big things would be, can you handle the scope of this thing? So I took, one of the most ambitious sequences from the pilot, and I got a storyboard artist and I broke it down, and I was like, this is how I would cover it, because I know this is a thing that, I'm going to need to prove to you guys. So, when these opportunities come along, you have to be uber prepared and over prepared and really just ready to completely dive in on the deep end. So did a massive pitch book, met with the showrunner, the EPs, the other producers, and just had a series of meetings with them. And then just got this crazy call on a Thursday that was like, hey man, you're flying to New Zealand on Tuesday. Like, you got the job.
Wow. So just because I'm overly detailed about things. So when you put together this pitch book, did somebody tell you to do that? Or is this something that you just did on your own as a, if I want to get this job, I had to do my homework type?
No one ever tells you how to do any of these things. I mean, you have reps and managers, and I love my reps, and they were very helpful in being like, this is what you need to prepare and this is what you should think about. But yeah, no one ever really tells you or prepares you for these things. And in fact, you probably do a few. I mean, I remember some of the first meetings I took when I was very young after my first short. I'm sure I completely bombed and said all the wrong things. But I remember sitting in on, I'm going to forget her name now, and I feel really terrible for it because she's just awesome. It was so insightful. She directed Jennifer's Body and Aeon, and she directed Aeon. She directed Aeon Flux, and she was talking about how she got that job. She talked about the meeting for Aeon Flux, and she was, again, like, smaller, like had come from a kind of smaller world. And she was like, she asked, is this the meeting? And they said, yes. And so she prepared she told us about how she prepared this crazy document for it. And just went in and, it was like incredibly long, detailed. It talked about, shooting in Brasilia, and all these kind of things, just going into real specifics. And that always stuck with me. And I was like, okay, like, I know that if I'm ever in a situation like that, that's what I have to do. And that's what's not what's expected of me, but what I expect of me to do in that instance.
For people now, like, do you have any advice to give people? Like, should they be creating now? Because I know some people just want to hide under their bed, and never come out. But should people be, trying to make stuff now? And what can we kind of take away from being in the situation that we're at? How can we make the most of it?
I mean, listen, I think that what we're going through right now is a kind of collective trauma. It's a really scary thing that a lot of people are dealing with in different ways, and especially creative people. I think, we can feel things quite deeply. And so something like this, I can't tell you whether hiding in your bed or, forcing yourself to write is the best thing to do for you. But my advice, or what I think would be the best thing to do, would be to use this time to write. I think you should not say, hey, I need to come out of quarantine having written the end all be all or the next short. I actually think you should come out of quarantine saying, like, let me just try and write a handful of shorts, like some 5-page shorts. Let me not put the pressure on them. Let me not, this doesn't have to say everything I want to say about the world, but let me just try and write a thing. And if that sounds like too much, I would say maybe try and start a new writing routine. Like, you wake up in the morning, and the first hour of your day, you don't look at your phone, you don't check an email, you don't do anything. You just spend the first hour of your day writing or thinking about writing, thinking about, what the next thing might be. I think that might be more valuable than pushing yourself to write, to direct a thing. Though I think, you could also use this time to be studying, to be understanding filmmakers you like and why, and, what kind of shot choices you might make in the future. But I do think that, especially as filmmakers, writing is really kind of your way in. And it is the only way in which you kind of hold your destiny in your own hands. It is so unlikely that a great script is going to come falling into your lap. So it is so much on you to write something. I'll actually, funny enough, to bring it back to the third one this week, The third one this week is a 3-minute short, right? And the way in which I wrote that is I was actually in a writing program at the time, and the professor gave us a writing exercise called a cliche exercise. And the idea of that was you take a situation you've seen done to death a million times. Someone telling someone they're fired, someone telling someone they're pregnant, whatever it may be. And you find a way to flip it on its head, just to do it in a way that's different than a way you've seen it before. And that was the exercise. And she said, you have 5 minutes. And you have 5 minutes was kind of like the magic word, because we all went, oh, it doesn't have to be good. We just have to try something. And I would really encourage everybody to take that approach with their writing, would be to say, look, if you sit down saying that I have to write the next thing that is going to represent who I am, that is going to be this kick-ass movie, you are going to sit at the table and beat your head against the wall. You should sit down and say, listen, the world doesn't expect anything of me. Let me write something that I want to write, that I'm interested in. I don't have to make it. Doesn't have to be good. Let me just try something. And in doing that multiple times, again, 5 minutes. The third one this week was written in 5 minutes. Especially for a short. You can write a short in an afternoon. So write 10 of them, and maybe one of them will be good. The idea that you would sit down to say, I'm going to write something good, and you'll write something good is crazy. But, think about like an artist. An artist sketches many, many things before he goes to painting. You should treat shorts and writing in the same way. Sketch out a bunch of ideas, and then one of them you'll go, oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting idea. And you should run with that.
I think that's a great piece of advice to leave off with. I'm going to wrap up. I'd like to thank Felix Thompson for joining us. My name is Jason Godbey. I have a show called No Rest for the Weekend, where I do this sort of thing every week. So you can check that out at norestfortheweekendpodcast.com. And we're on every podcast app and also on video. And for the Katra Film Series, I'm Jason Godbey. For Felix Thompson and myself, thanks so much. And we'll see you next time.